Hearings panel. For those submitters who have joined us over the break, just to let you know, welcome. Thank you for your submissions. We have 10 minutes allotted to make your submission. Robin will let you know when you're at 7 minutes, but if you would like any questions, question time from the councillors. And just to reiterate that we can ask you questions, but as part of a hearings process, it's not for you to ask us questions. So just to reiterate that, Michael, welcome. You're up.
Okay, radio. So this will be relatively quick, I think, and I can take it that everyone's read my notes. But the first thing, I support Federated Farmers. I know they've made a submission. I think so. It's really anything they're saying. So first starting off, so many years ago, to not the last chief executive, but the one before, during Colin Rain's time, there was a 1/3 increase in rural rates because of rural roading issues. So there was a big step change for the whole rural area, and it was a big number. So I just want to put that up in front of everyone, because you probably no one here that knows about that and wouldn't see or feel that. So it was real, and it did happen. During this election cycle, we've heard, particularly the food production industry, talk about the government. It's the government that's sitting in as a caretaker role right at present, but that they had brought in too many rules, regulation, red tape and everything, and it was costing money, it was taking time, and people couldn't keep up with it. And I think it was lost, for obvious political reasons, that those same rules, regulations, red tape and all sorts of stuff was going on to the urban area. And when you've got rules, regulations, red tape and stuff, it costs money. And I see that pretty much every day now in my role as a consulting engineer, and whoever's going to end up with the district plan process will see me and some others, particularly around liquefaction and earthquake zones, which are a major drama and in many cases are seriously wrong. So the urban people haven't really, they've been hidden a little bit, I guess, from these rules, regulations, red tape, and the increase in cost that's being brought about by all of the plans that people have to do. And so in this case, it's the council have to do on behalf of the community. I'm a member of the Waihini Action Group, so we did represent the community of the Waihini River and the floodplains. I understand about community and representing those people and understanding the issues. Then when I looked through this, as best I could figure out, even for myself, so I'm out of town, that the tables, this is tilting the tables slightly more towards the rural area. So it's another increase, tipping it that way. And I fully understand that this meeting is only about how you cut the pie up. It's nothing to do with the size of the pie. So we're talking about the pie. And that as best I can figure out, this proposal will tilt the table away from the urban and towards the rural. So the urban people who you might think might vote differently are not going to feel the tensions, the pressures, the strains that they should feel with respect to the rules, regulations and red tape that's being brought in. And so the table is not level, and it shouldn't be the role of a council to sort of shield them a bit more. Unfortunately, they're in this and they have to wear the trouble that comes with it. The other issue for this council is that a previous chief executive, you know, we all know it was just a balls up. And balls ups cost a lot of money, and so you've got to work your way out of that, and that's not going to be easy. And the only people that are going to pay that are ratepayers. And so, yeah, the ratepayers here are getting a double whammy of having to sort that mess out, and then twice reapportioning the size of the cake. So my submission is around that I think it's somewhat unfair that the table has been tilted away from the urban and towards the rural again. The rural did take a big hit many years ago, and I don't see why they should have to take another hit because of rules, regulations and red tape, most of which is out of your hands. I appreciate that, but everyone's got to wear it. We can't just make one route wear. So that's my submission. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Councillors, do we have any questions on this submission? That was very clear. Thank you for your time. Thank you for putting in. Oh,
There's other notes that you might want to leave with us. Have you got notes from your presentation? You might.
they're actually in this. There's notes in the submission.
Same note.
Yeah.
I'm just doing speaking notes as opposed to the written submission. Yeah.
Page 52 and 62. Okay. Oh, 6 minutes. Well done. Head time. Chris, welcome.
Thank you for having a review. I've asked for a review over many, many years, and it's great that it's actually happening. When I did my submission, I agreed with the SUIP on extra dwellings on paper. And I think it's a great idea on paper, but then when we drill down, we found that it's actually not a reasonable situation. If we go back to about 10 years ago, we were all land value. And when it was decided to go to capital, we had a big, we really learned about our rating systems. And one of them was that 10% of all targeted rates in town are paid by everyone in general rates. So when I had a dairy farm, I did some calculations, and some of those were that I was actually paying more than the user of the thing because of a high capital value. But the other thing we found that with a high capital value, it wasn't reasonable that the one in town, if you look at one as your differential, we had a far higher capital values in the rural area. So to try and make it use the word fair, Federated Farmers wanted 0.6, but we had a political thing and it came out at 0.8. And that the reason was because the capital values are so different. You can add in two, we don't have street lights, we don't have footpaths, things like that. When we also drilled down into the SUIP for the extra dwelling, it was found that it's actually in the capital value of your property in the rural area. That if the thing was pointed out that you're not going to have a policeman go around and look at it, it's going to be, you look at your government valuations to see if that house is there. Am I correct? And therefore it's in your capital value. So you're actually about a second tax. So that was another thing when I say on paper, it sounded great. We're actually drilling down and finding you're actually paying for it already. When I did some maths too, and I don't know if Jeff, you were looking into those ones when I divided all the properties with an extra dwelling. And when I did it for in town, they were paying an average of $900 for the dwelling. And the one in the rural was $1,368, which was $468 more for that extra dwelling in the rural. Did that get rectified at all, Jeff? Because that was the thing I brought up at a meeting. That now all I did was divide the number that you've got here, but I took off one. So if you've got 4 dwellings here, and it cost you an extra 2,000, I divided by 3. Because it's actually you're already paying for the first one. So first of all, I made a mistake, and then I realised you've all got a 1. So if it says an extra 20 dwellings, you divide by 19. And so when I did just even in the extra dwelling cost, it's cheaper in town than in the rural. So I don't understand the reasonings behind that. The other one too is that with the town people paying more of their targeted rate, in other words, 95%, they actually went down in total rate bill on average about 5%. So where did that come from? It can only come from the extra dwellings. So you must already know how many dwellings are out there. We've made up this formulas. You must already know. So you've got, now I looked at my situation, I stay the same. My rates don't alter, about $5. But the thing is, I've gone from 0.8 differential to 1. But I'm paying 5% less of the targeted rate. So I stay the status quo, but so therefore, someone's going to be is paying. And it's the dwelling one, which I come back to not being fair. Great on paper, but not going to work out from what I can see. I just want to remind people of the reasons behind the capital value and the 0.8. And when I see the word appropriate in your papers here, I take offence to that. Because it's not appropriate means that it's equal or fair. There is a big difference between rural and urban. And that's why we had the differential. Somehow you've got to cut your pie. I think the Federated Farmers brought up the forestry as the area that you should really be looking at. And I just followed to Featherston now, a logging truck. And I'm saying, as I'm looking at them, I'm saying, what are they paying towards to us? They're wanting us to fix the road. So that's the area you've got to really be looking at, because there's a lot of years ahead in logging, and they're the ones who are smashing our roads, and they want me to pay for it. I mean, that's what, if you're keeping that pie the same. Now, they won't have a very low land value because that's part of the rating thing with them, because they can't be charged for the trees. But you could you could do a high differential on them. You could easily do that. That's the area you should really be looking at.
Thank you so much. Open to councillors for questions. Grace, you've been very quiet.
I'm behaving myself. I'll ask a question then now. Now I've been prompted. Thank you for your submission there, Chris. My only question is, you're talking about the sewer as one aspect that's hurting rural, and the other aspect being the change in differential. I wonder is there one that you find will be hurting the rural community in a more significant way?
Well, as I say, I stay the status quo, but I've had to give up the differential, and then the less targeted rate. Which shouldn't have been that to start with. I shouldn't be paying. That was part of why I wanted. That's why I'm so impressed you're having a review, because I've not been impressed with the 10% for a start. I know there's public good, and that's why he's thinking 5. We're all going to pay something. It's a public good thing, but it's just the capital value is the problem, and that's why we had that differential. You just talk of averages, just average house in town, average property in the country. You can't say they're the same, and therefore we're going to pay the same.
Thank you. Any other questions, Steve? You're looking ponderous. No question?
That's just normal.
Okay. Making sure you're still awake. Chris, thank you so much for taking the time, A, to make your submission, and B, to come speak to us today. Much appreciated. Our next submitter, we have Stuart Forbes.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to my submission. I'm a new person to the Carterton district, called the Territory Hotel. I've heard some damn good stories about that place from the past, so I'm keen to see it with a better storyline. But see the people of the community and travellers enjoying the space. And the reason for my submission is that I'm concerned that is the Carterton Council in charge? And if they are in charge, are they attracting people to Carterton? Is that a part of the game? Or are they trying to tell people what they can't do in Carterton? And so I've sort of got that feeling coming to Carterton that there's opportunity here because of where it is, a small provincial town. We know it's very highly rated. It's the highest rated small provincial town in the country. And I think, why is that? We're not crammed in by the speed, by the major river. We don't need new major bridges. Why are our rates so high? And so I'm here to try and be it with a regenerative process. I've bought the pub site, 2 hectares, since I've got enough room. I've got a neighbour that's willing to sell more land to me because he's related to the people that set it up. I've got the money and I've got the experience because I'm 69 years old. I've been a businessman and master and all my life. I started working for the neighbour over the road at Will when I was still at school. And so I've got no political background except my experience dealing with Marsden's to make my land at Homebush available for the wastewater upgrade. And that in itself was a major learning curve. So I've just got a few notes here. Why the Teratai at Clearville? It exists and it's historic and it's regenerative. I've got an owner, as an owner, I've got intent and I've got a team of people around me who share that vision. And that is to set it up as an ideal place for people to stop off when they're travelling, relax, have food and drink that's safe to continue to drive, an entertainment centre where people don't have to travel long distances. And I've been travelling as a contractor or ex-contractor around with my new technology all around the country. And the roads are in a horrifically bad state. I mean, they talk about health and safety, but health and safety for everybody that goes out on the road at the moment is a major issue. And all the workers have got hats, jackets, none of the machinery's got drivers because of health and safety, but the potholes are actually the health and safety issues. So for Carterton, if people are travelling, we've got to make it a good experience. We've got to de-stress them, give them good value for what they can afford, and especially the community. The community, if they're hardworking couples, they've got a family, they deserve a place to go where they can afford, relax, have family time and teach the next generation. So that's what my role is. That's why I'm here. So the issues are, and we've got an entrance off State Highway 2 travelling north from Carterton. We've got 2 hectares. We've got an entrance off State Highway from Clearville heading south into Carterton. We've got enhancement of the town. There's an issue, like I don't really think anybody particularly gets thrilled to bits heading into Carterton. And so we want to make it a good experience. And that will attract people and then that word will spread. And so I think it could be very good for Carterton and the community and the people travelling through. And so it's really centred around a rest area for travellers. It's the middle of the valley. Travellers, it's the halfway point. It's near the highway, but not in it. If you're travelling through Carterton, you're either being chased by a logging truck or there's nowhere to park. And now that I've moved to the territory, I've realised it's a real shock. The logging trucks start at 2:30 in the morning and they go past my place at the Territory pub about every 3 minutes. So the roads are shambles. And so what we're trying to do is create an environment that is peaceful and people can afford, and the word spreads. So that's what I've got to bring to Carterton. And we're calling it a regenerative centre growing forward because we all have to grow. You know, councils, why are our rates so high? Our rates are high because basically the provincial towns have been stifled of income for decades. But vehicles have become more transient where people are travelling a lot more. I mean, you go on the highway and see the number of big units that are travelling up and down the North Island, carting our groceries, our food to processors. We haven't even got a freezing works in the Wairarapa. So it's time that we change that. But for a council how on earth are you going to get the rates under control? Because when interest rates were at an unprecedentedly low level for the last 8 years, and when inflation was at an unprecedented low for 8 to 10 years, how come rates continue to go up? They should have been coming down. And now, if people can't afford to pay the rates going up, you've just got to stop charging them more and bite into what your expenses are. You're obviously not accommodating the requirements of the ratepayers in the sense that the roads are a mess. It costs too much to do everything. Inflation's through the roof. So all I would say is please support me at the Teratai to make it a good regenerative centre for the community and the travellers that come through Carston. Now, have you got any questions?
That was going to be my question for councillors. Thank you so much. Really appreciated everything that you had to share with us this morning. Dale.
Questions?
Yeah, thanks, Stuart. Have you got any comments to make about the rating review proposals that,
Well, yes, to the degree that in my submission, I said very strongly that I think it's counterproductive. I think trying to get more rates from people to collect revenue is not the answer. The answer is to reduce your costs, increase your efficiencies, and encourage people to live here and share the rate cost. So you need more people, or you've got to take your council down to half the size, maybe a quarter of the size.
yeah, okay, thank you.
Stuart,
And it's better to grow it.
I'm a little bit confused. Your submission team seems to talk about social housing, but I think what you're talking about is accommodation for travellers.
No, not specifically. I mean, Masterton's, Carterton's got a real housing shortage, an accommodation shortage. And these things all go hand in hand, you know, like somebody has to build the houses at a low cost and make them available and at a reasonable price. And so is Carterton District Council doing that in its own right? And if it isn't, why isn't it? Or is it going to encourage other people to do it? Because you can't have people homeless.
So your focus out there at the Teratai is in fact to provide low cost, low income housing.
Well, not specifically. What I've been talking about is a place that is good to go to, that is affordable, whether it's accommodation, drinks, family entertainment. They all go together, but you have to be able to afford it. And making it affordable means, is the council in support of it? Do they want that at that end of their town as a welcoming thing? And if they do, what are they going to do to assist in that role? Well, one thing would be don't rake the hell out of any development that we do if it's for community purposes. And that was in my submission.
That is it.
I just have a quick question on point 2 in your submission when you sort of, your plan is to renovate the Taratahi, which I think is fabulous because it's such a simple building and it has so much history. You mentioned adding additional dwellings. So will they be, is in your mind, I guess, following on from what Steve was asking, are they going to be sort of like more motel style or full-time rentals?
Well, I'm trying to select what the requirement is, but at the moment we've got 6 units that are just single bed, single units. We're putting in a little kitchenette to support that. And we've got an earthquake issue on the latest built part of the building that needs strengthening. So we're just in the process of doing that now. And the reason is because we want to do more development for accommodation, as we don't want to just supply single overnight accommodation. We would like people to have the option to be able to settle in for a little bit of a longer period, because otherwise you're chopping too many of the people we're trying to attract into the district from being able to come.
So that's where the additional dwellings that you speak about in your
Those
submission,
dwellings will be separate from the existing building.
Wonderful. Thank you. If there are no other questions from our councillors,
Definitely a shortage of accommodation. Yeah, yeah.
we just got to keep it to questions, Steve, as well.
Well, it's been difficult with, watching this housing thing finally resolved. It's got worse.
Yeah.
And so the people who've got houses, it's got worse for them as well. But the people who desperately need houses, the people that really need that at this time, there's not a lot of affordable options.
Yeah, just one
With time, so it was it.
was great. Yes, Stuart, thanks for your submission. Have you, talking about your extra accommodation that you're going to build there, have you got an indication of what the SURPs will mean to you?
Sorry,
The SURPs, the single separate use independent property that the extra charge that was in the proposal. Have you looked at how many units you're likely to build and what that extra BT
if you want
have an opinion on?
to solve housing crisis and you want to attract people to stay that are travellers, you have to make it affordable. Anything that's going to be counterproductive towards affordability, so that's rates, access ways, the encouragement for it to be a true rest regenerative area. You know, there are none of these around. A lot of them around the country. I've been travelling right up into Waikato with my tractors demonstrating my
Stuart, I'm really sorry that we've gone over the 10 minutes and
Awesome.
and some of what you're talking about kind of fits more into district plan type conversations than rates review as well, but really appreciate taking the time to come and see us today and your submissions and love what your plans are. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Next up, we have Ron Shaw and Tracy Higgins. So Tracy's with us online. Ron, are you tag teaming a little bit?
No, Tracy's just keeping an eye on.
I came in sure you don't say the wrong thing. Tracy, welcome.
Tracy.
And feel free to jump in. And if you want any of us to sort of poke him with a stick, just let us know.
Kia ora, thank you.
Tracy shut it, folks. Everyone else has got on the Okay.
Welcome. So 10 minutes, allow some time for questions. We'll let you know when it's 7.
Councillor Cherry Campbell, councillors. Thank you. I don't intend to read through the submission in detail. When the submission was written, of course, we didn't know who was likely to be the government. We are closer to that, not completely there yet. But we will be having a Minister of Internal Affairs who is much more responsive than the outgoing minister. And we will have political parties in the Treasury benches who are in favour of sharing revenue of some shape or form. New Zealand First have some ideas and ACT have some ideas. But the reality is that the council is on a hiding to nothing, as you well know. Rates are a blunt instrument, they're regressive, and they can be very unfair. It's the only thing you've got. You've got one tool in your toolkit, and you need more. So what I'd say on top of this submission is that as soon as we know who the Minister of Internal Affairs is, make an appointment to go and see them. The new one may actually allow you to go and see them. I know that Nanaima Uta never did. So there's a real opportunity there. In terms of rates and the proposal, there's a number of comments about the taxpayers' union league case. The league table should be able to be answered why the rates are higher in Aotearoa. When people ask that question, we're told it's because we've got the best water systems or we've got better water systems than anyone else. But your financial controller should be able to do a proper detailed management accounting analysis of why those rates are so high. And if that could be done and disclosed, I'm sure it would actually dampen down some of the criticism that you're wearing. I haven't seen it done yet, but I think it should be done soon. And if that analysis was done, then you'd be in a better position to have an informed ratepayer base, and we could see where our money was going. As a business group, we support the idea of targeted rates, where the ratepayer who benefits from the cost should pay the fully absorbed cost of those services. So not just the direct cost, but overhead cost as well. And I understand that at the moment, roading is spread over the entire district, and it would be a useful exercise to examine targeted rates for roading and see where the full cost or the largest cost lie. The other thing that we think you should do is look at other revenue streams. So this ties back to my earlier comment on rates. Is there any way of, for example, with Waihini Gorge Road, however expensive to maintain, that it leads to a dock reserve campsite, such like? I know getting money out of dock is worse than getting blood out of a stone, but those sort of things should also be explored. And so in terms of the UAGC, keeping it close to the 30% limit, the cost almost a poll tax, not quite, but almost. And I remember Federated Farmers saying that they don't like this to be less than 40%, so that everyone, including people in the town, get to pay their share. So that's now the other thing is that looking at the modelling in the proposal, some ratepayers are going to face an incredibly large increase in their rates. Putting aside the fairness or otherwise of that, is there any way that the impact of that rates increase could be phased in so that there is some way of adjusting to it? Now, in terms of service you've had input on that, we as a business group are interested in the impact on businesses. So we've got increases in commercial in the urban area range from 0.26 to 29.5%, and commercial Wainoa from minus 4.1 to 25.3. So there's some big increases going to come to the commercial ratepayers. And the risk is that large increases in rates for commercial ratepayers, particularly at the low end of the scale, which would include a few of the shops on High Street, might be enough to tip the balance from financial viability to unviability. And the last thing we need, of course, is more empty shops on Main Street. As a business group, we are encouraging more people to come to Carterton, and we love the sound of what you've been saying to us. The commercial differential, we're okay with that change as long as there is some public scrutiny of the commercial charge, so that we're probably suggesting the reinstitution of the economic development group, and having that keep an eye on the hundreds of thousands we spend on development, economic development. We see money going into Destination Wairarapa with the general consensus that not much comes back to Carterton specifically. We see money going to WEBs, which seems under the influence of Wellington NZ to be more interested in the breaking world of AI and Web3 and the Internet of Things, rather than training baristas, which we're also desperately short of.
7 minutes.
So that's probably all I need to say. I don't envy you your job. As I said, rates are a blunt instrument, and we need to swing a blunt instrument cause lots of damage. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Tracy, did you want to quickly add anything more before I open up for questions?
Oh, kia ora. I just wanted to talk what Ron has said there. It's really important for us as Go Carterton to make sure that we are supportive of our businesses, and we want to work closely with the council just to make sure that money that is spent wisely, and also to ensure that if we can help out with public-private partnership to help fund some of these necessary increases, we're okay with that. But thank you.
Thank you, Tracy and Ron. Open to councillors for any questions to either Ron or Tracy. Submission, thank you.
Thank
Lots
you.
of information. Great. Thank you very much for your time, both of you.
Thank you. Ka kite.
So next we have Roger Stile.
Cool.
So Roger, format is that you have 10 minutes. So we'll let you know when it's 7 minutes. Then give us some time. Perfect. Not time for questions. As it's a hearings process, we aren't able to answer questions, but we are able to ask you questions. Thank you. Thank you.
Leave some time for questions.
Great.
Hello.
Morning.
Thank you. Got a few, I think. I'm Roger Stiles. My wife Catherine and me, we're Carterton residents and provide rental housing in Victoria Street, single property with multiple units. Mainly small flats aimed at older persons. My occupation, I'm a senior policy advisor to housing and urban development. Housing policy is a big part of my job. My submission, you've got it there. The key point that really I want to make is that the current system is unfair, particularly on older persons. I think the system thinks one person pensioner unit the same as a 5-bedroom family home with 4 adults and 3 cars and 2 dogs. So you're basically treating the same. If you look at page 7, consultation, it's a good table with some examples. Basically there you've got 2 examples. One is a $1.1 million house. And that's $1.1 million house is having a 6% rates reduction to $5,000. And you've got a block of 4 flats with a lower capital value, $980,000. It's not even worth $1 million. But 4 flats is having a 22% rates rise to $15,700. So if you think about effects, those examples there, you've got 4 people probably in those flats, similar to a big 5-bedroom house, but paying a third of the rates. All in favour of a fair effects-based system, but a uniform annual charge per house. It's really the house isn't the user, the person's the user. So more people than ever over 65 are renting. In my job, I've seen it's doubled in the last 15 years to around 300,000 people over 65 are renting, and that's going to get worse over the next 10 years. Not everyone has the luxury of entering retirement, owning their own house. This is also going to drive development elsewhere. Masterton, South Wairarapa, obvious choices. I've noted that Masterton doesn't need a UAGC. They say the fixed UACs for services are enough. In South Wairarapa are proposing to more than halve their UAGC to $475 Across the country, UAGCs are just a bit of a ruse. They allocate a big chunk of money evenly to reduce the rates on multi-million-dollar housing enclaves, C2, things like that in Wellington, St Heliers, Mission Bay, Ōrākei and Auckland. Carterton doesn't have a pocket of bulky housing. We're pretty generic. So, I mean, the general rate probably almost unique, no large general rating income. In our own situation, we were looking at building 3 more units and getting underway shortly, but we're not sure. We've put pause on that now because of this. Largely, it's an extra $30 a week in rents. People on pensions, they're limited by the pension and they're limited by the maximum accommodation supplement, which is not that flash in Carterton. It might be in Auckland or Central Wellington, but Carterton's still quite low in terms of that accommodation supplement. So, yeah, I mean, end of the day, Carterton needs more units, not less. I've noted that new builds have been slowing here. This year to September, consents were issued for 62 housing units in Carterton, down 40% on last year. That's a much bigger drop than Masterton or South Wairarapa. If you look at the last 4 months, you've had 8 housing units consented. 4 in July, 2 in June, 4 in July, 1 in August and 1 in September. So that's brilliant. It's going great. It won't stop completely. Carterton's going backwards. This policy will help kill off remaining activity. Finally, it sends a clear message to older people who are increasingly renting that Carterton doesn't want it. So if you do go ahead with this policy, I suggest you put one of these up at each end of the city coming in so that people understand that Carterton doesn't want them here. There we go, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Roger. Well, and I was like to say, I really appreciated your submission and especially your diagrams. So they were actually, I'm digital, so that's what really worked for me. Open to questions. Dale.
Yes, thank you, Roger. If council accepts that people drive costs and your submission is that the sewer as proposed is unfair for the reasons you've explained, you're a policy advisor, you're an expert in that field. What should council look at that is more fair but addresses the reality that people drive costs?
That in 2 parts. I mean, I've done 15 years. I've had some similar to you. We've wrestled with these things. 2 parts of that. One, people drive costs. So I would be looking at, if you're going to do water, then look at things like metering or charges that actually, you know, directly, rather than a fixed sum per house and you get a quota, just meter from first unit of use. Just do the whole thing with metering. Second part is that general rates do have a role because affordability, part taxation, part charge for services, any rating system. So Carterton's very blunt, almost equal across all houses, but there is a role for having a value-based part of the rating system because it is partly tax. At the end of the day, it's partly a tax, as well as a charge for services. So yeah, so that's up to you guys to decide, but it's the right balance. I think it should be more general rate rated and a bit less uniform charged. That's my view of where it sits. But at the end of the day, Carterton's also got some of the highest rates in the country, and it's probably more useful to look at getting spending down and the overall rate bill down and getting more development in to share it rather than obsessing about who pays what. And so that's, you know, and that's something I'm happy to help with. I mean, I'm happily do my time to be part of an independent sort of look at or independent review of what's happening. I've done financial strategies in the past for council, and you know they were quite good.
Thank you.
Yes, Brian.
Thank you, Roger. Thank you very much for your submission. Really good, visual, and I like it. Just looking at the example A and B on page 2, where you've got your two different basically scenarios. One with one rental, basically one rental income, or a household with occupied by 2 adults and 2 children. The second, you've got 3 units on a single total with basically three rental incomes. So with your comments about user pay and people drive costs, with the three urban sewerage charges or SURPs on that rental, those rental units, what's your thoughts on covering that with extra rental, with the extra rental income, basically, and passing that on to the user pays, basically?
Well, two things really. You know that those 3 people all have 3, and 4 people have 4. So you can only, they'll be using the services, wastewater services, more than the 3 people in those individual units. So my argument is that the actual effects are higher for that household A in terms of wastewater than for those 3 pensioner units. So, and I've covered in my submission just now that very limited in terms of ability to pass on increased costs to people on fixed incomes, pensioners, fixed income support. So I don't know.
Yep, thanks for that. Thank you.
Ron.
So, Roger, you're suggesting that our attempt to reduce rates for the elderly might actually increase them? Reduce costs, living costs to the elderly through their rates might actually increase them through their rent.
Could do. Is this initiative driven by reducing costs to older persons?
Yeah.
Can't see how.
Thanks.
Yeah. Unless there's a specific rebate.
Steve?
One quick question, just you did say that if we introduce the SURPs, I'm not sure this is in your submission, but you did say that would result in an increase of $30 per week, which is about 1,500 and change a year. But that's more than the UAGC that's been proposed.
Yeah, well, whatever, $24.30 or whatever it is, it's $1,200 a year, something between 20 and 30.
UAGC under these proposals would also come down though.
No other questions. Thank you for coming in and speaking to your submission today, and thank you for your very, very comprehensive submission. Appreciate it.
Leave these.
I know I said I was visual, but I don't like that visual. Mr. McFadgen, John, welcome.
Yeah.
Allow time for us to take some questions. We'll let you know when 7 minutes is up.
But we'll read it anyway, so if there's a question. Well, thanks very much for the opportunity to speak to it. So I suppose the first thing when I had a look at this, I thought, well, the rationale in the blurb, I was a bit appalled at, and to quote it, was in relation to access services and who could afford them. The who could afford them was an appalling rationale because I don't think anyone on council would have access to any information which would give them material to base that on. So I thought so if we move down through my submission, and I got in the principles of rating, that's according to John McFadgen, of course. But the first principle is never to decrease rates. And the second principle is in fairness and usage and availability. The third principle is providing essential services for everyday life, like road, sewage, water. Fourth principle is to incentivise and promote existing business and enterprises, new and old, and bring visitors into town. And I thought that the proposed changes absolutely against all of that. So the guy before, multiple dwellings, I was interested in that because I don't know how many multiple unit titles there are in Carlton, but I do know that there are a significant number of country, and those ones in the country are generally for accommodation. So that accommodation is obviously providing for visitors from other centres. So what happens is to the visitors that come here, the country areas, is that they buy probably groceries in the supermarket, buy a bit of other stuff in town, then they go out to where they're staying and stay there for that period of holiday, whatever. So no cost to Carlton whatsoever, no use of services by those people, 100% benefits and profit. Now these rural accommodation, and a similar thing would be in town, like Airbnb operators, they're not fortune makers. The individuals operating the businesses generally don't pay themselves an hourly rate, but they are people that are prepared to maintain the buildings, scrub floors and clean toilets. And without being willing to do that work, they wouldn't be in business. So I looked at Glenburn Station, and I got Kelly to run the rates on it and the change, and we've got 9 or 10 different buildings to use for accommodation. So under the change, if you look at the submission, the rates currently are 19,693, and they go to 29,000, $10,000 increase for a business that, you know, isn't a fortune maker. When you come to rentals, but like the guy that was sitting here before, I thought the rentals, people that rent houses, I actually think deserve medals, really. But if you've slapped $1,000 increase on buildings that are rented, landlords bang rates up, the rentals up by $20 a week to cover it. So the people you're going to punish by doing that are the low income earners and or elderly, as the gentleman before said. The other people would be hit, I presume, would be like Carter Court, multiple units. If they've got 100 units and you bang $1,000 on a unit, you bang $1,000. So they've got to get it from the elderly or put probably their own operation in jeopardy. When it comes to targeted rates, and what I look down through the tables, and I could, well, targeted rates is obviously differential. Well, first thing is the differential between rural and urban, and that was set up. That differential is because in the country you provide your own sewage, you provide your own water, and all the costs attached to it. And I looked at the costs of what people pay in town for that. In actual fact, if the council were prepared to supply us in the country with water and sewage and everything else, so that rate would be more than happy. Certainly would be. But anyway, so the differential years ago, I can remember there was discussions for many years on that differential between rural and urban. And the councillors of the day, they sort of wrestled with it for a long time. They got all sorts of information. And the number they come up with was rural should have been 0.6 as opposed to 1, to taking those things into account. What they actually arrived at, I don't know whether, for whatever reason, politically or whatever, was 0.8, and that's where it is today. So, so when the other piece of the other thing that I looked at was regarding forestry and the damage they do to roads. And if you look down through my submission, I did a little table there, and what I compared in terms of road usage was 1,000 hectare sheep and beef property, with 1,000 hectare forest. And I also took ran a comparison of a 300 cow dairy herd in rough terms. So more or less the same labour unit, so 1,000 hectare sheep farm. So as a comparison. So if you look down to the table, you'll see that over 25 years, a sheep and cattle, 1,000 hectare sheep and cattle farm has about 750 truck and trailer movements. That's over the 25 years. A 300 cow dairy farm, tankers going in and out for, I worked on 200 days a year. 250 in total was 6,200. And a 1,000 hectare forest block has 20,000 truck and trailer units going in and out over a 25-year period. Now, that number didn't take into account metal that's coming into eroding. So it would probably be another 5 to 10% of truck and trailer loads. So if you look down at
3 minutes left, John, so.
oh, that's right. So if you look at the number of hectares in forest in Carlton, 10,000 hectares. So essentially, just on logs alone, you'd have 270,000 truck and trailer units on the roads. That's pretty quick. So if you look at a comparison of another council, Wairau District Council, they've rated forest and they've used various ratios. I actually spoke to them. And if you look at in terms of forest, well, the ability pay is certainly there. If you look at from my own, I've had 40 years involved in forestry, so I can sort of wear two hats on that. But foresters, off the record, they do accept that they have an obligation to pay for the damage. On the record, slightly different response. But the proviso is that if you do put a target rate on them, which you should, that money's ring fenced and actually is spent on rural roads. It doesn't just get into the great council income. So yeah, so that's probably about me.
Thank you, John. Get it. Question time. Mr. Gallen.
John, you, like a few other people, mentioned the forest eroding and the damage and costs of that, if we were to target that and penalise the forestry owners, who are the forestry owners? Where's that go back to, do you know?
Well, most forest owners are actually offshore. So like out in Carlton District Council, like at Timor, there's a big chunk of forest owned by an Australian Superannuation Fund. J&L got some, and there's others, but throughout, if you look at the whole region, if you look at the whole of New Zealand, most forests are owned by offshore. So by the fear is, problem is that if you ignore it and don't address it, then the rural roads get damaged, and then in a few years' time, the council will probably get an independent consultant in, and he'll go out and he'll do an assessment of all the roads, and he'll say the rural roads are a hell of a mess. They need a major amount of money spent on them to bring them up to an acceptable standard. And so the only option you'll have is to rate all rural ratepayers for it. So the overseas offshore owners will get away effectively scot-free.
Thank you. One question, Steve, and then we've hit the time.
John, just curious as to the talk that you've got 9 or 8 extra SURPs on your property. Can you give us an indication of the size of those SURPs and the amount of people that might be staying in each one of them?
I don't know, yeah, but we'd have hundreds over the year. But the size of them varies because they were station buildings. So like the station cookhouse, the station where the shepherds stayed. Then there's the fisherman's cottage that sleeps 6. Some of the big ones sleep like 16. So it's sort of in that range.
I just have one really quick question kind of following on from Steve's. So how many of your separate dwellings are used for workers, seasonal workers? Because that would impact a lot of the farming community, I would imagine, with the.
Well, we've got 2 houses, well, 3 including our own. 3, just 9 accommodation. 6 in accommodation here, so we've got in permanent residents, we've got our own. And then we've got shepherds in one. And Lockie kind of another, so it's 3. So in regional accommodation out there, we've got 1, 6, 2.
That's cool. I was just wondering how many, sort of thinking from the rural community.
Yeah.
Excellent. John, thank you so much for, again, putting a submission in and coming to speak to us today. And the 2 Johns can tag team, and we have JB up next.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity to be here today. Rather interesting sitting on the other end of the table. Excuse me. I've heard some really good technical and interesting comments from other people submitting today, and mine's sort of more general. And I'm kind of focusing a little bit on the future in my comments. Excuse me, I had a horrible head chest thing. I just wanted to first of all start off with a thank you to the council. And I include elected members and the management for what you do for our cardamom community. It's not easy, I know all about that, but rest assured there are plenty of us who appreciate what is done. And today I'm not here to be critical of you. I'll be upfront to say that a major consideration of my submission leans towards rural ratepayers. It's appropriate that a review of our rating system is being carried out at this time, as the last major one was in 2010-11, and I was one of the ones that was part of that. It was huge, as we took the general rate based on land value to based on capital value. This had a huge financial impact on especially rural properties for the obvious reasons of the higher value properties. My main target in my submission is how council consults with its ratepayers and community. There are 2 sections to that. Firstly, consultation on the rating review, but very importantly, I feel how consultation will be carried out in future annual and long-term planning. The effects of a change rating policy and what it means for the future costs to ratepayers. I don't feel 2 public meetings was really enough for policy as important as a rating review. And I know there was a very poor turnout to the rural one held out at Gladstone, but hey, at the end of the day, it was a weeknight and a lot of rural people were working. It was docking, it was carving, all that sort of thing going on. I guess if I just use an example of what was done in the past in 2010 and 11, it was a very sort of contentious issue, changing to the general view, rating going on to capital value, because very few councils around New Zealand had been able to do that. And everybody asked us once it was through, how the hell did you do that? Because we failed. What we did was we went out to small gatherings of ratepayers. There were woolshed meetings. There was meetings around the town at houses. All that type of things happened. So it was across the rural and it was across urban. Everyone had their opportunity to have their say in a setting other than what we're doing here today. And this is important as well, but that was really, really important. And I guess that's a really important part of what I'm saying today is how we consult, or how you consult, sorry, with the community about what you're planning on doing. A comment on the SERPs or the rating of a UAGC on each dwelling. Rating on each dwelling for the UAGC needs a structure around it, in my opinion, that is updated and made current on a regular basis, even annually. The reason for that, like many rural rate-paying properties, there are dwellings which may have all services in place, but are no longer used as farming requirements, and economics have changed. And I don't think people want to get nasty surprises about this. And I'm not sure how you do that. Someone said to me today, well, maybe it can only be done on a 3-yearly revaluation. But out there in that rural community especially, there are a lot of those properties that maybe, I've had a conversation with a senior councillor about this, that maybe need, do they rip the kitchen out? Do they rip the toilets out? Do they disconnect it all so they're not going to get rated on it? People will need to understand that. And there's a lot of people out there in the rural community completely unaware of what's happening with this rating review. There's also issues for rural ratepayers around increasing environmental demands and standards and climate change effects, and they're all leading to a lot of additional costs that the individual ratepayers are having to fund themselves and are not funded from the likes of general rate. A really positive tool to me to use in the future is to make much greater use of advisory groups from the community. An example is the Carterton Rural Advisory Group, and also any other forms of this to help council in determining how it allocates costs for striking rates in future. And that includes in the urban area as well. There are a lot of different groups out there, whether they're service groups, Rotary Lions, that type of thing, going to them. There's a function on or something. People like to have a chat about it. And there is a wealth of knowledge in those groups like this who can give relevant and positive information and feedback. For my own personal, when I looked at this, and I again was another one, I got Kelly to run it through. My rates last year increased, CDC rates increased by 10%, and my Greater Wellington Regional Council rates increased by 22%. These sorts of increases are not sustainable for any ratepayer. And I say the system of rating property across New Zealand basically broken. And I think we need central government to shoulder some of this burden. And I already heard today someone mentioning about Ron, it might have been approaching the powers to be once this new government is finally in place. I'm currently working in the rural sector as a facilitator for a national organisation, and the level of stress is heartbreaking, to say the least. Mental stress has become overwhelming for many people, driven especially by weather and environmental events and financial factors. Thank you for hearing my submission. Any questions?
John. Councillors, does anyone have any questions on his submission?
Oh, right.
One, John, I'm interested in your comment, the updates on the SERPs and especially in the rural area. And you suggested it should be an annual update. I'm a little bit concerned about the extra work that would involve, because at the moment it's only done by QV. Have you got any ideas on what would have to be done?
Well, I mentioned the submission, that is a difficult one, but there might be extra work involved for the council or management, but that cost is also an extra burden to the ratepayer in those rural areas. And I just feel that, and I'm not only just talking about rural here, I'm talking about in the urban community as well. We had a gentleman before talking about this little group of rentals he has. That this needs to be a mechanism where that information can be got through to the council, that this will no longer be able to be rated as an additional UAGC. And there may be a very simple formula for actually doing that. But it's something I've floated now that for the council to be really aware of, because this is all about fairness for all ratepayers in Carterton. So I just and I've sort of honed in on that fairness one, and you know, for me, my rates will increase by 5.5%. And that's solely, I only have one building, so it's solely down to the move of 0.8 to 1. That's where that lies.
Thanks, John.
Awesome. John, thank you very much for submitting and taking the time today. Next up, we have Mike Ashby. Mike, welcome.
Thank you. Gotcha. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity. I was unaware of this rate review until Ron told me. And I feel the method of consultation is lacking a bit. It's the farmer's fault for perhaps being head down and start working. And the farmers I've consulted with about this were unaware of it. So that's, yes, something needs to be done to improve that method of consultation. In my solution, I talked about economic development. It benefits all, so it should be rated accordingly. I just feel that the method of, as others have said, it's to reduce the urban rate, and to do that, you're increasing the rural rate, and the impact on us is our rates will increase. Our CDC rates will increase from 24 to 33,000. We have 5 houses on the property, so a portion of that is with the number of houses that accommodates our work team, and about 6,000 of that is related to just an increase in general rates. Rating should be simple and understandable and to the community, and I think this review is adding complexities and creates unintended consequences. And Sharon, I'm a member of Carter Court, and Sharon will be talking about that, but the impact on that charitable trust and its community housing is immense. And then there's an impact on this farm employee dwellings and homestays, which John has alluded to. Those draw little on Carterton's resources and add quite a bit of income to the district. So I suggest that we reduce the UAGC and focus more on general rates. And as John spoke about the Rara District Council of increasing rating the forestry, that's 3.4, and farming at 0.6, and urban at 1, is a fair way of going about it, or should be looked at. The impact of forestry, I choose a similar example to John. I relate to our farm of 1,100 hectares, and the effect of if that was in forestry, it would be equivalent of 800 truck and trailer loads a year for the 20,000 truckloads of timber that would come off that place. Whereas in our method of farming, we're using about 50 truck and trailer loads annually. And if it was a dairy farm, it would be about 250, 300. So this trucking, the impact of trucks on our roads and the number of trucks that use the roads is immense. And I think that forestry should be charged accordingly. I looked at the road user charges, and it's quite interesting to note that a tanker that does multiple pickups from multiple farms and delivering to the processor is about, I forget the figure now, but I think it's net $288 a load. And a forestry truck, a logging truck delivering logs to the port, be $150 a load. So there's a hell of a lot of road user charges being collected. I was wondering whether you're getting your fair share. Because the impact on our little roads is quite immense. So, maybe we should be looking at that. because there is a lot of rates connected. So I think for the same scenario as John. The other impact on the roading is created by the adverse events. I mean, roading is the big thing that we're interested in, is rural ratepayer. That's about all we're paying rates for, really. A lot of us don't use Carterton that much because Marston is a big service centre. We relate to Marston. We as personally use Carterton where we can, but Marston has so we don't have that relationship and don't really utilise your facilities that much. But my understanding and looking at the roads is there's a lack of maintenance on the roads. Basic water tabling and culvert maintenance. Now, we as farmers maintained our roads like you are. We've been terrible strife. We know because it impacts us that we have to maintain those water tables and culverts. And I just think this the way things are worked is the contractors wait for something to go wrong and then there's a major capital cost. And there was a comment made that, well, we've had these adverse events and it's increasing the cost of maintaining rural roads. Well, you are receiving an extra subsidy. I think it's a 75% subsidy for those adverse events. So bear that in mind. And in summary, I propose that the UAGC would be reduced and more funded from the general rates. And there was a really robust review done 2010-11, as John said. And I think the Feds came up with a figure at 0.6 and, you know, it was agreed on at 0.8. So I think that is a good way of looking at it, increase in making note of the forestry impact and be aware of the fact that rates should be where the cost lies. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. Question time, councillors.
Mike, you've echoed the comments that John Booth made regarding our consultation process.
Yeah.
And that there are a lot of farmers out there who don't know what we're up to. We spend a lot of money trying to communicate that, and Lisa's spent hours and hours and hours. We don't think that there's some obligation on the farming bodies like Feds to put this in front of people. I think we've done as much as we could.
John explained, I was not part of that consultation in 2010-11, but I came to meetings. It was a lot better. Well, Ron was there too. So yeah. It was
we didn't have the internet.
Sorry, there was and we're all busy, you know, as everyone is, but it just we didn't get the message.
Yeah, it was pretty lonely at the meetings we did have.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
I thought the message would be had, you know, highlighted. Rural rates are going to increase by 40%.
So are there any other questions from councillors in relation to Mike's submission?
Thank you.
No, Mike, thank you very much for your time. Much appreciated. Sharon, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody.
Can we just have quiet for Sharon, please?
As Robin said, my name's Sharon Parker and I'm the chairperson of the Carter Society. And supporting me today, there's quite a few members of our executive here and other entities. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to my submission regarding how the proposed change in the rating basis in the urban area would adversely affect the society and our residents. I'd like to start by giving you just a brief background of the society and a potted version of the history, because I know a lot of you are long-time Carterton residents, or probably most of you, but some may not be totally familiar with the Carter Society. We actually began as a result of the will of Charles Rocking Carter. I'm sure that name's familiar to everybody. He died in 1896. His will made a provision for a home for aged poor men. The home duly opened 4 years later in the year 1900. It was situated in Morton Road. The will was very restrictive, for example, just providing for men, and it wasn't able to be changed because it's a will, without an act of parliament. So in 1961, an act of parliament was passed to broaden that scope, to allow a wider range of people to be looked after. In turn, this led to the formation of the Carter Society, which is a not-for-profit charitable incorporated society. In the 60s, the home moved from Morton Road to its current location in Pembroke Street. The society, and there's quite a number of them here today helping, we're all volunteers. And we rely on volunteers and community funding support to survive. We're proud of the fact that aged care provision has been continuous from 1900 until the present day, so that's getting on for 125 years. In terms of rental accommodation, we've had a small number of rentals on the Pembroke Street site since the 1960s. In 2015, this council gifted us 38 accommodation units on various sites around Carterton. We subsequently made all the improvements to comply with the Healthy Homes legislation. That is, we insulated them all, provided heat pumps and extraction. We've also re-roofed 20 of the house, all the units, 20 in Porritt Place. And the interiors are progressively being updated as well. We feel that we're acting as a good landlord and are fulfilling the vision that the council had when they handed the properties over to us. These improvements would not have been possible out of income. We rely on and are fortunate to receive the support of community funders. As mentioned in my submission, the burden of the society, if the rating proposal goes ahead, is approximately $50,000. We already pay circa $75,000, and I believe that if we're not the highest ratepayer in Carterton, we're certainly very near the top of that tree. Rates cost in terms of our rental housing. Rates are our highest cost really, without adding another $50,000. The vast majority of the increase in this rate, the vast majority of the $50,000, basically relates to the properties that the council has gifted to us for the provision of aged care, or elder care. In passing, I'd mention that while those properties were in council ownership, obviously there were no rates. So they're already getting a much higher income than they were when they were in council ownership. Plus, we've improved them all, which my understanding wasn't really possible with the council because they couldn't access the funding that we were able to access. We believe that our situation is an unintended consequence of this proposal. Another unfortunate thing at the moment, and most people are probably aware of this, but aged care funding in general is at the bottom of the pile and far as health funding from the government. We really are struggling for funding. Whilst the society is in a stable financial position, we don't have excess uncommitted funds. I gave Porritt Place, the Porritt Place example in my submission. And I repeat here that any attempt to pass on $17.50 a week to the top tenants that we have who are vulnerable pensioners with low fixed incomes would be a massive impost for them. For the reasons mentioned today and the other information provided in my submission, I see the effect of the proposal on the Carter Society as a case of reverse Robin Hood, where money is taken from vulnerable elderly folk who don't own a house and is given as a subsidy, relative to what's going on today, to homeowners. In my submission, I've opposed the change and requested that plan does go ahead and exemption be made for charitable organisations. On reflection, the Carter Society's situation is unique in several regards, in that we are a charity fulfilling a major accommodation role for the vulnerable elderly in Carterton. In addition, we also have the strong historical ties to the founding father of Carterton, Charles Ricken Carter, as the benefactor whose foresight led to the Carter Society, and also that relationship that we have with the Carterton District Council with the gifting of the rental units to the society. In recognition of this unique situation, should the proposal pass, I would strongly urge a specific exemption for the Carter Society. Thank you for your consideration.
Sharon, thank you very much for presenting and for your submission. And thank you also to everyone here from the Carter Society for coming and being here to support Sharon. Questions from councillors?
I just have one, and this is just information for me because I don't really understand the system. Just in terms of rental subsidies from WINZ or whomsoever, if you, I'm not saying this would happen, but if you did have to increase the rentals, is some of that likely to be subsidised in any way?
No, we've taken the deliberate decision not to be a community housing provider.
Okay.
And the main reason for that is if you become part of that system, you lose control of who you can have in your housing. And our housing, we want to be specifically for pensioners, people over 65. Mm-hmm. And we also want control over
well, I think we know what you mean.
The type of people that are going to get on with each other. And
mindful of all the other tenants when you are placing tenants.
And we've got vulnerable people in there, so we do not want, people that have an issue in our environment. So we have made that conscious decision. Our other thing that we do is we only charge 30%, a maximum of 30% of national super. So we are literally a low cost for people who have basically no other alternative.
Thank you. And our last submission for today is Len Cooper.
Thank you.
Nice to see you again, Len. We'll let you know when there's 7 minutes and then we can allow some time for questions if you.
I don't go that long. But being an educator.
I'll wrap your knuckles.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm Len Cooper, present chairperson of the Ashmore Park 24 which is a village off Brooklyn Road of 74 freehold villas and caretaker's property. In council's information rates review of this year, the following statement is made under what are we doing? And it says we're looking at the fairest way to share rates between different ratepayers. We at Ashmore Park would suggest that as a timely review, as we are presently being charged, from our perspective, an unfair amount of rates. Ashmore Park Village ratepayers, each paying the same amount as a standalone of a similar value. So in my case, at 59, I am paying over $4,000 a year, which would be the same as anyone with the same capital value in Cardiff. If this village had been a normal subdivision, Hartley Road, Hartley Road, there would have been approximately 30 rateable properties, but you now have 75. There would have been less ratepayers, less rates collected, more services would have been required. If we pay the same rates as a normal property, why do we get less service? This is a question that our villagers ask. Is this equitable? The Unit Titles Act requires each villa owner to pay into a long-term maintenance fund, which provides insurance cover, roads, footpaths, curbing, pipes, street lighting. Ashmore Park rates are the same as I've said before, any freehold title with the same GV and Cardiff. Yet Ashmore Park villas meet the costs of roading, footpaths, curbing, wastewater pipes within a property, stormwater pipes within a property, sewage pipes and street lighting. All these are within the village boundary. Yet each of these are charged proportionately on our rates. The stormwater does not leave the property. We have 17 soak holes and a large storage tank. Yet we have a stormwater line charge of approximately $88 per water. The sewage pump, and this is always a sticky one. This was a requirement when the initial consent was issued. It is there to pump sewage from the village into the town's wastewater system. We understand that there are 18 of these pumps in Cardigan, 17, including one to deal with Villa Estates sewage, which is sister estate, are outside the boundaries of the properties they service. 17 are serviced by Cardigan District Council. One isn't, Ashmore Park, as it's on non-council land. Is this equitable? We could make the assumption that by paying similar rates to our freehold neighbours, we are paying for the above but receive no service for these items. In fact, it could be seen as paying twice, as we are subsidising other CDC residents. Precedent may have been set when Australian banks were fined for charging fees but not providing full service. In summary, we request that the rates in the villas at Ashmore Park Village reflect the services we receive from CDC. At the moment, CDC receives more rates from Ashmore Park Villas, but does less than for other rateable properties in Cardigan. Thank you.
Thank you, Len. Question time, councillors. Does anyone have any questions? Yes, Grace.
I just have one question regarding the Unit Title Act requiring them to pay a long-term maintenance fund. Is that the equivalent of a body corporate fee?
It's part of the body corporate fee.
that is in addition to that as well, or?
No, it's included in the body corporate
Okay.
fee. So the body corporate fee at the moment, including the management fee, is approximately $195 a fortnight. And the body corp, our part, the body corporate fee rather than the management fee, which is separate, we have to allocate money at about $1,300 a month off the top of my head into a long-term maintenance. So if there's an earthquake or the roads or the water, we've got funds sitting there. Now that is a central government requirement for every body corp to do.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No, thank you, Len.
Thank you.
So that draws to a close all those that requested to be heard in the submissions this morning. Councillors, just before we break for lunch, if I can just say that Bronda has said if you've got any specific questions or any further information that you would like before we reconvene at 1 o'clock, she's kindly offered to use her lunch hour to sort of find any answers, as opposed to us throwing questions at her this afternoon when we are doing deliberations. So if you do have anything, don't flip an email very quickly. And if you could copy all the councillors in on it, as well as sending them to Bronda, that would be great. And we will reconvene at 1 o'clock.
Can I just say, Madam Chair, very good timekeeping.